Hi Quilty friends, welcome back to the Frosty Quilt. If you're watching this video, I hope that means that you've already sewn together all your blocks. You should have a whole lot of Frosty and a whole lot of brooms. Okay, so now it's time to start to sew them together. So my suggestion is go through, it's on page 5, and find out how many Frosties you need to sew together next to each other and how many brooms you need to go and sew together next to each other so that you have those blocks partially constructed. So to sew a Frosty block together, we need it to match here and here. That's the only places. These two seams and these two seams. So what we need to do is we need to press all of these seams one way, and I have them pressed down there and up here. Now, that means you have to repress some of them. Okay, so we're going to take this one and we're going to press these all down. This one's already down, so we might as well, that's one less seam. So I'm going to repress. Now press carefully and slowly so that they lay flat. And then after we get them flat on this side, and if you have trouble, a fabric folding pen that we saw in one of the earlier videos, that might be helpful too. So I'm going to get these all pressed down. And that's so that I can get these to nest together as I sew them together next to each other. Okay. Now I'm going to flip it over and make sure I don't have any folds and give it one last press, get it to lay really flat.
You're using a lot of steam.
Yep, I am. So be sure you've got water in your iron. Okay, those are all pressed down. I think it was this one I was going to do. So now I'm going to press these all up. So I've got to repress this one on this side.
And then when we lay them together, they're going to nest.
And when we lay them together, they will nest. And they should match up very nicely. Lots of threads.
I feel like we should sing Frosty the Snowman.
That's not a bad idea.
Except that we don't want to sing for people.
No, we definitely don't want to sing for people. They definitely would not be back for the border video. Think, oh my God, those people are going to sing. All right, one last press on the front. Slow process, but worth it because this should go together very nicely then. Okay, we've got these seams all pressed opposite directions. So now when I put them together, this one goes this way, that one goes that way, and you can feel them lock. And once you feel them lock, then we can put a pin in there. Now, some of you may want a pin, some of you don't. You can, sometimes I give it a try the first time without pins and see, and it comes out very nicely. And then if it doesn't, then I go back and I pin it. But I always put a pin in at least this first one so that when I start to sew, I know that I've got that in the right place and I've got my edges together. So I always put a pin there, even if I'm not going to pin the rest. And these are all lining up very nicely, so I probably would not pin the rest of these. I would just kind of adjust them as I get to them and make sure I can feel the nesting. It's all about feel. You can tell. If you have a lump, that means they're not nested. They're stacked on top of each other. If you can feel a space, that means they're not coming together. They're not locking. So start with one pin and see if you can do it. If not, if you're nervous, go ahead and pin them off. Okay, so then this is what it will look like when you're done. These are up, these are down,
Yeah.
and now they've come together. Okay, and that looks really nice. They're all lined up.
Let's show them from the back too.
Okay, these are all down, these are all up. And there's 4 seams that we have to worry about. We don't have to worry about this one. There's no seam on the other side of that one. So these 4. Okay, we'll talk about which way to press this in a minute. Now we're going to talk about the brooms. The brooms are much easier because I have these 2 sewn together, and as you see, there's only 1 seam that has to match up. So you're going to press 1 up and 1 down, and it doesn't matter which one, because when you sew it into the quilt next to a Frosty block, they don't match up to anything, and neither do these. So you don't need to worry about the direction, whether this should have been up or down to go to the next block. When you sew them together, see, these don't match up to anything, and these don't match up to anything. Okay, so now you've got your double broom sewn together. Okay, and your double Frosty blocks sewn together. So now you're going to use your diagram. And of course, in the first row, there's no doubles. Okay, but in the second row, look, it's a double broom, a double Frosty, and a double broom. So you're going to sew those together. And as I told you, all you got to worry about is your top and bottom coming together because nothing has to match. So you'll get that row sewn together. So what I would do is I would sew these all together. Okay? And this would be row 2. And you can see on my instructions, I've written row 1 to the left, row 2 to the right, row 3 to the left, row 4 to the right, row 5 to the left. And I've actually done that same thing on my row markers. I've written row 1 to the left, so that tells me what direction I'm going to press these seams. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this to here and this to here, and this is row 2. Row 2 is going to go to the right, and it's, for me, the right means as I'm looking at it, so that would be this way. So I'm going to press all these seams, the one where I sewed the brooms together, this one, this one, this one, all to the right. Actually, the ones where the brooms come together, you don't have to worry. It could even be open because they don't match up to anything. It's only, see, all these blocks are now the same size. See, a Frosty block, they're all the same width. The double brooms and the Frosties are all the same width, so you don't have to worry which way that seam goes. So all the ones, these are all going to get pressed to the right. Okay? And then my last row is row 3. And row 3 is a double Frosty. So it'd be this one once it's sewn together. A double broom once it's sewn together. And then a Frosty. Okay? And that's row 3. And row 3 is going to get pressed to the left, which is that way, because it's as I look at it is how I do left and right. Okay? Then all you do is sew row 1 to row 2. I would sew row 3 to row 4, and then sew them all together. I like to do a little less. I don't like to just keep adding rows because it just gets bigger and bigger. So I sew 1 and 2 together, 3 and 4, and maybe 5 together, and then sew the 1 and 2 to the 3 and 4. So I keep my sections smaller as I go, and I don't have such a huge quilt on my, because it gets heavy and hard to manage on your sewing machine. So when you've got it all sewn together and you've got this nice block, come on back and we're going to add borders. There's actually 3 borders. One isn't very obvious because it's a thin border of the background that goes all the way around. Then there's a red border, and then there's a cute little candy cane border. So come on back when you're ready to put borders on and we'll address that.